Welcome to our chemistry channel.
Hello.
Today we are stripping away all the noise and focusing purely on the logic, the really rigorous, beautiful logic of organic chemistry. Specifically, we are going to tackle the beast that is IUPAC nomenclature. Now, I know what you're thinking. Nomenclature just sounds like the most boring word in the dictionary. It sounds like bureaucracy.
It sounds like filling out forms in triplicate at the DMV. I get it.
Exactly. But in chemistry, it's a language, a precise global language.
It absolutely is.
Right.
And it's a language that was born out of, well, necessity. If you go back a few hundred years, chemistry was a bit of a Wild West.
Right.
People named molecules after anything, how they smelled, where they were found, sometimes even the person who discovered them.
Which is poetic, I guess, but it's useless if you're trying to actually figure out the atomic structure.
Completely useless.
If I tell a chemist in Tokyo to pass me the spirit of hartshorn, we're probably going to have a communication breakdown.
Probably. But if you use the IUPAC system, you're speaking a universal code. The mission here is unambiguous precision.
Okay.
The goal is that when I say a name, a specific string of words and numbers, you know exactly, atom for atom, what that molecule looks like without ever seeing a drawing.
So to master this, we're not just going to recite a bunch of rules. We're going to do a visual deep dive. We've got a source document here. It's a skeletal structure of a complex alkane, and we're just going to deconstruct it.
Yep. In organic chemistry, we don't draw every single C for carbon and H for hydrogen because it would just clutter the page. We use lines, zigzag. The zigzag is the carbon backbone. Every point or end of a line is a carbon atom.
Okay.
And sticking off this main line, we have branches, or what we call substituents.
Right. So our job is to look at this messy stick figure and give it one name. A name that no other molecule in the entire universe possesses.
Exactly. It's a unique identifier. The IUPAC system is algorithmic. It's a flowchart. You have to follow the steps in a very specific order. If you skip step one, or you let your intuition take over, you will end up with a name that sounds scientific but actually describes a completely different substance.
Okay, so let's walk through the algorithm. Step one is usually the place where people feel the most confident, but it's also where the biggest trap lies.
It really is.
Step one, finding the parent chain.
The cardinal rule. You must find the longest continuous chain of carbon atoms. This is the spine of the molecule. Everything else is just an accessory attached to that spine.
Okay, so on the surface, this sounds like a counting game for, first graders. I put my finger on one end, I trace a line to another end, and I count the dots. Whoever has the most dots wins.
In theory, yes. But in practice, you are fighting your own brain. This is where we run into the horizontal bias.
I love that term. It sounds like a logical fallacy.
It's a visual bias. We are trained from birth to read text from left to right in a straight horizontal line.
Sure.
So when you look at this molecule, your eye immediately locks onto that horizontal zigzag running across the middle of the page. It just looks like the main part.
I'm looking at the diagram right now, and my brain is screaming at me that the horizontal line is the spine. It's the highway. Everything else looks like an off-ramp.
Okay, so let's test that hypothesis. If you count that horizontal highway, starting from the far left and going to the far right, what do you get?
Okay, tracing it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 carbons. Feels solid. It's a 6-carbon chain.
6 carbons. Seems like a good candidate. But in organic chemistry, you have to check every single path before you commit.
Every path.
Look at the right side of the molecule again. There's a fork in the road there.
Yeah, as I get to the right side, the line continues straight, but there's also a pretty massive branch that just shoots straight upwards.
Don't assume the straight line is the main road. What if you took that exit? Trace the path from the far left again, but when you hit that fork, pivot and go up.
Okay, let's drive that route. Starting left, driving along the highway, hit the fork, and I turn up the ramp to the top tip. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6 carbons.
Well, this is awkward. We have a tie. The horizontal path is 6. The curving upward path is also 6.
It's a classic nomenclature dilemma. We have 2 potential spines of exactly equal length. And this is where a novice might say, well, just pick the straight one. It looks neater.
That is exactly what I would say. If they're both 6, doesn't the straight one win purely on aesthetics? It's just easier to look at.
Absolutely not. The molecule doesn't care about your aesthetics. We need a rigorous tiebreaker.
Okay, so what's the rule? How do we break a tie between 2 equal-length chains?
We use the rule of complexity, or, to be more accurate, the rule of maximum branches. If 2 chains have the same length, you choose the one that has more branches attached to it.
Wait, pause. We want more branches. That feels completely backwards. Usually in science, we want simplicity. We want Occam's razor. Shouldn't we pick the chain with the fewest, cleanest attachments?
That's a great intuition, but think about what fewest attachments implies. If a chain has fewer branches, it means those branches have to be bigger and more complex to account for all the atoms.
Oh, I see. It's like packing a suitcase. You'd rather have 10 pairs of socks than one giant, weirdly shaped object that doesn't fit anywhere.
Precisely. If we pick the chain with more branches, the substituents themselves are smaller, simpler, and easier to name. We're optimizing for simple components.
So we're maximizing the number of problems, but minimizing the difficulty of each individual problem.
That is a perfect way to summarize it. Modular simplicity. So let's apply this to our two paths.
Okay, back to the visual. Path A, the horizontal highway. If that's my spine, what am I left with?
You go straight across, that whole big chunk that goes up becomes one single giant Y-shaped branch.
Yeah.
And you have that little one on the left. So 2 branches total.
2 branches, one simple, one pretty complicated. Now, path B, the curve.
If you take that curve up, you leave behind different pieces. You've got the little group on the left, another little group in the middle, and then that straight end you ignored becomes another small group on the right.
So that's 3 branches.
3 branches versus 2 branches.
And since 3 is greater than 2, the curve wins.
The curve is the parent chain. The horizontal line is a decoy.
That is diabolical. If you didn't know that rule, you would walk straight into the trap. You'd have the right carbon count, but the completely wrong structure.
And that's why step 1 is the most dangerous step. You have to fight your horizontal bias.
Okay, we've survived step 1. We have a 6-carbon spine that zigzags and turns up. Now for step 2, we need to name this spine. This part I actually feel confident about. We're dealing with 6 carbons.
Standard Greek prefixes.
Hex, like a hexagon. And since this is a skeletal structure with just single lines...
Single bonds only. That means it's fully saturated with hydrogen. It's an alkane.
So we just weld hex to hane, hexane.
Correct. No matter what fancy jewelry we hang on this molecule, its last name is hexane.
Okay, hexane. Step 3. We need to tell the world where all the branches are. We need an address system.
We need locants. We have to number the carbons in the spine from 1 to 6.
And this brings us to the next cage match. Do we number from the bottom left end or from the top right end?
The rule is the lowest locant rule. You start numbering from the end that gives you a branch at the lowest possible number. You want to hit a branch as soon as you can.
Okay, let's race. Start point A. Bottom left, if I start there. Carbon 1 is empty. Carbon 2, boom, there's a branch.
So your first hit is at number 2.
Now let's try from the top right. Carbon 1, nothing. Carbon 2, wait, there's a branch here too.
It's a tie, again.
Seriously, this molecule is designed to be annoying. We have a branch at 2 coming from the left and a branch at 2 coming from the right. It's symmetrical at the ends.
Nature loves symmetry, but IUPAC needs a decision. We can't say, oh, just start from wherever you feel like.
So how do we break this tie? Is there another rule of complexity for numbering?
No, for numbering we use the first point of difference. Since the first numbers are tied 2 versus 2, we don't stop. We look for the next branch. We keep comparing the sequence until one side wins.
It's like sudden death in a penalty shootout. If the first round is a draw, you go to the second kick.
Exactly. So let's play out the sequence. From the left, you had a hit at 2. Where's the next one?
Okay, walking down the chain. Carbon 3 is clear. Carbon 4, right. There's the junction. So my sequence is 2, then 4.
Okay, team left has the score 2, 4. Now for team right, we had a hit at 2. Keep walking.
Moving to the next carbon. That's carbon 3. And look at that, there's a branch right there at 3.
So team right has the score 2, 3.
Okay, so we are comparing 2, 4 against 2, 3.
And it's simple arithmetic. 3 is lower than 4. Team right wins.
The top right tip is officially carbon number 1. The number in is settled.
This is so crucial. If you had stopped at the first tie and just guessed left to right out of habit, your numbers would be higher. You would have violated the lowest locant rule.
So our final addresses are, we have a branch at 2, a branch at 3, and if we follow it down to the end, that last branch is at 5.
Correct. The addresses are 2, 3, and 5.
Okay, recap. Parent is hexane. Addresses are 2, 3, 5. Now step 4. We have to identify who lives at these addresses. We need to name the branches.
Let's look at them. Start with the one at position 3. What does that branch look like?
It's distinct. It's not just a single stick. It goes out and then it bends. It looks like a little elbow.
That bend indicates length. That is a 2-carbon chain attached to the main spine.
Okay, 2 carbons. The prefix for 2 is eth.
Right, eth. And because it's a substituent, a fragment, not a whole molecule, we replace the ane suffix with eel.
So it's an ethyl group.
Correct. We have an ethyl group at position 3. Now what about positions 2 and 5?
Those are just straight lines, little stubs.
A single line represents a single carbon.
1 carbon is meth, so these are methyl groups.
Exactly. So we have a methyl at 2 and another methyl at 5.
Now, here is where the efficiency kicks in. I know chemists are, let's say, economical. with their breath. We don't say 2-methyl-5-methyl, do we?
We absolutely not. That's redundant. If you have multiples of the same group, you group them together using Greek multipliers. Di, tetra.
So since we have 2 methyls, it becomes dimethyl.
And we group the numbers too.
That is satisfying. It tells you everything. Di means there are 2 of them. Methyl tells you what they are. 2,5 tells you exactly where they're parked.
It's a perfectly self-contained packet of information.
Okay, we're in the home stretch. Step 5, the final assembly. We have all the parts spread out on the workbench. Hexene, 3-ethyl, and 2,5-dimethyl. We just need to bolt them together, but I feel like there's one final trap waiting for us. The alphabet trap.
This is the one that frustrates people the most because it feels arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to follow it. The rule is, when you list the substituents in the final name, you do it alphabetically.
Okay, alphabetically. So we are comparing the names of the groups. We have ethyl and we have dimethyl.
Right. So what letters are we comparing?
Well, logically, ethyl starts with E, dimethyl starts with D, A, B, C, D, E. So
Yeah.
D comes first. Dimethyl should go first in the name.
And that is the trap. You just walked right into it.
Wait, really? Did I get the alphabet wrong?
No, you got the IUPAC logic wrong. When you're alphabetizing substituents, you ignore the prefixes that indicate count. You ignore di, tri, tetra, all of them.
Oh, come on. Why? Dimethyl clearly starts with a D.
Think about the logic of indexing. The di is just a counter. It tells you how many. It's basically an adjective. The actual name of the thing is methyl. If we sorted by the prefix, the position of the group in the name would change every time you added another one. Methyl would be under M, but dimethyl would be under D. It would be a nightmare to organize. So we ignore the prefix.
Okay, that actually makes sense when you explain it that way. You want the methyl family to always stay together in the index, no matter how many there are.
Right. So we're comparing ethyl, which starts with E, against methyl, which starts with M. The di is invisible to the sorter.
Okay. E versus ME wins easily.
E leads the way. So even though dimethyl has a lower number, 2, and visually starts with a D, it sits in the back seat. Ethyl rides shotgun.
Man, that is strict. Okay, I accept the logic. So the order is ethyl, then dimethyl, then hexene. Now we just need to punctuate this sentence. And I know the grammar of chemistry is a little weird.
It's strict but simple. Rule 1. Numbers get separated from other numbers by commas, like 205.
Okay.
Rule 2. Words get separated from numbers by hyphens. And Rule 3. The last group slams directly into the root name. No spaces.
Okay, let's build it slowly, piece by piece. Start with the ethyl.
3-ethyl, hyphen after the L.
Now the dimethyl. Weld it right onto the L of dimethyl.
Let's read the whole spell out.
3-ethyl dimethyl hexane.
It sounds so intimidating. If you saw that on a shampoo bottle, you might freak out. But we just derived it from scratch.
And more importantly, you can reverse it. If I whispered that name to you in a dark room, you could pull out a notepad and draw the exact molecule we started with.
Hexane, you draw the zigzag 6. 3-ethyl, you add the branch at position 3. 2-color-5-dimethyl, you add the branches at 2 and 5. It is a perfect loop.
It really is a universal code. It highlights that you can't just eyeball organic chemistry. You can't just feel it out. You have to submit to the algorithm.
You really do. 1, longest chain, but maximize branches to break ties. 2, lowest numbering, but use the first point of difference to break ties. And 3, alphabetize, but ignore the prefixes.
If you follow those 3 commandments, you'll never get it wrong.
You'll nail it every time.
Thanks for diving deep into the logic with us. We'll see you on the next one.